welcome back to another episode of Health Talk with the Pros. I'm your host, Danny Reyes, and today we're going to be talking about a pretty hot topic in the world of sports and just basically life itself, and it's concussions. I've got my really good friend, Taylor Langon here to help us talk about that. And Taylor, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Taylor. I am currently a doctoral student at the University of Georgia. I am getting my PhD in kinesiology, and we do concussions from start to finish. That's our bread and butter. So yeah, this is a really good topic.
Absolutely. Taylor's got an extensive amount of experience in the concussion world, as you'll see a little bit later on in this episode. And yeah, former classmates of ours, go Gators. Now she's a Bulldog, but hey, it is what it is. So let's get right into it. A lot of people have heard of I guess the common phrase of, oh, that person got their bell rung, or that person got a brain sprain, or whatever. They think it's a concussion, right? But kind of give us a little bit deeper definition about what exactly a concussion is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those two terms really get to me because it's downplaying the injury so much. Like, we think about, okay, you break your leg, you're obviously going to go see a doctor. Your brain is in charge of so many things in your body. Obviously, it's the power of your whole body here. And so why are we going to downplay such an important organ? So ultimately, it's one of those things like you hit your head, you have a direct blow, whiplash mechanism. Your brain is not solid in your skull there. It's moving around quite a bit. So from shearing forces and all of that, the neurons that are in your brain, not to get too extensive and science-based, but all of those get damaged during that mechanism and during that injury.
A good
so
visual
it's a lot
that
more serious than what people actually say it is.
Absolutely. And a good visual that I always thought about, kind of what we were taught in school was, you get like a bunch of Jello and you put kind of like a little plate around it, or one of those cake holders, and you just shake the thing and everything is bouncing everywhere. And in reality, that's kind of how it acts, right? I mean, we both took gross anatomy in college, and we actually got to feel what a brain feels like. And it's, it has a little bit of weight to it, but it's actually really soft. Like, just touching it with your bare hands could damage a brain. So, your skull is only so thick. So when, you see football players or, just anyone, hit their head, you could just imagine kind of what the brain is going through inside of the skull.
Yeah, exactly. I think you bring up good points. Like, it's a lot softer and a lot more delicate than what people truly realize. And like I said before, it's in charge of so many things. So we got to keep that thing protected as much as we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, we always talk about concussions in relation to sports. And that's extremely important, right? There are a lot of concussion issues when it comes to sports, but how can we? I guess, how does it apply to to real life, to just people like you and me that aren't necessarily in sports? And then we'll kind of cover why it's so important in sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think an important stat to know is, from ages 15 to 24, the second leading injury for that age group there is head injuries, whether it's MTBI related to sport or outside of sport. But head injuries are the second leading cause of injury in 15 to 24-year-olds. So that's a pretty big deal. First being motor vehicle accidents. And often those two do go hand in hand. So, I mean, it's not just sport related. It's from car accidents, from extracurriculars. We see athletes that hit their head when they were sitting up out of bed in their lofted dorm room, or they hit their head on their desk, or a door hit them in the face. I mean, we as people are clumsier than we like to admit sometimes. And there are just freak accidents that happen. So it's one of those things we can't control. Everyone is bound to ultimately put themselves in a situation where they could possibly sustain a concussion.
Absolutely. And I could recall many, many times where just, being on the sidelines of a football game, an athlete wasn't hurt. It was actually one of our staff members that got hurt because someone threw a ball and they weren't paying attention on the sideline. The ball hit their head. And this individual was, had a pretty severe concussion just from that. And,
Right.
People think, oh yeah, I got hit with a football, but people also don't know that a football is actually really hard. And,
Absolutely.
and when thrown pretty hard, it could, it could inflict some damage.
And it's one of those things, like, as I don't like to use this, but it's almost like contact sport athletes almost have an adaptation. They're used to sustaining these repetitive impacts over and over and over again. Whereas like we see swimmers, track athletes, they get hit once and it doesn't have to be that severe and it causes a concussion. So it's definitely something to take into consideration and understand the big picture there, that when they're not used to that kind of stuff, the smallest thing can result in an injury.
And you bring up a good point there with swimmers, especially because I was going to kind of pose this question to you. You know, for a normal person listening to this, they're going to say, how the heck is a swimmer going to get a concussion, right? Oh, they might hit their head on the side of the pool deck, or, you know, they might fall on the pool deck. Sure, those are all viable, you know, ways that someone could sustain a concussion. But what people don't realize is, like a swimmer or a diver, for instance, when they're diving into the water, that water is almost like hitting a hard surface, like a floor, right? From 10 meters, from whatever height that they're jumping from. So give us a little bit, a little bit of background on how you've seen a lot of concussions with swimmers, of all people, that are in water.
We always make the joke, like swimmers, they don't really belong on land. They're used to being in the water. That's their comfort zone. So when they are on land, it's a little bit riskier. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like they practice for a reason. They're, especially divers, they're trying to get their timing right. They're spinning in the air and they sometimes lose body control. We've seen some of this with gymnastics over the summer with the Olympics. And it's one of those things where they lose control of their body. They don't know where they are. They're not protecting their head when they're going into the water. They're not raising their hands at the right time to kind of diverge those forces, or they're hitting their head on the diving board. So it's really, there's a wide variety. We've also seen stuff on dry land. Accidents happen. They miss the med ball and it hits them right in the face. So, you know, it's a really wide variety of stuff that we see with different types of athletes.
Yep. It's not, concussions isn't directly centered towards football or maybe baseball, getting hit with a baseball. It's everywhere, really, in every single sport. I've covered golf, and I've had a golfer sustain a concussion. Mind you, it wasn't on the golf field, but, or on the golf course, but they still got hurt, right? They still sustained the concussion, and it happens, right?
Right. And that right there just goes to show how everyone should realize that there's a chance that they could sustain a concussion. It's not just sport related.
No one is immune to it, unfortunately, yeah, exactly. But it could happen. So talking about just that you're not immune to it, let's talk about some general concussion symptoms, right? So we've already kind of put it out there. We kind of know what the concussion is. We know that it's a big deal in sports. So I guess, how could the normal person now distinguish, all right, I should probably go get checked out right now. This isn't just a headache, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like sometimes we see people who have concussions have the initial headache and whatnot. Just obviously you got hit in the head, like, yeah, you're going to have a headache. It's going to be sore, but it's important to be able to differentiate the length of time. Like, okay, is that getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same type thing? So we're looking at headache, dizziness, nausea, any signs and symptoms of that are deteriorating and getting worse over time. Those are definitely some red flags, and you want to get checked out. I mean, in any case, you do want to get your head checked out. Like we said before, it's a very important organ. And ultimately, over time, you want to have the best brain health possible. So if I would always say, if you're unsure, go get it checked out. It doesn't hurt to just go and get a medical professional's opinion.
Right, absolutely. And you know, we kind of touched on it earlier when you said whiplash, right? There's, unfortunately, motor vehicle accidents are a thing that happens. And, you know, I know people that have suffered a concussion that weren't necessarily in a very high velocity motor vehicle accident, right? It was kind of a fender bender type thing, but the fact that their head whipped forward and then hit their headrest, you know, that was enough to give them a concussion. The thing was, they weren't in this huge brain fog. They weren't confused. They weren't dizzy, but they had this underlying headache for a few days, you know, and then just in conversation with talking to them, asking them how they were doing, they're like, yeah, you know, I just kind of have a headache. I've just been kind of ignoring it, taking Tylenol, you know, my neck's very tight. And they kind of started naming off all these symptoms. And it's like, hey, you should kind of go get that checked out, you know, and thankfully that they were fine, right? They were able to get an MRI, a brain MRI, and all these things. And the reason why we say that it's so important, right, is there could be a brain bleed, right? Kind of talk to us about the really dangerous side of a concussion.
Yeah, obviously there's different degrees, and there's a big umbrella, and we don't really try to say, oh, it's just a mild concussion, or oh, it's a severe concussion. A concussion is a concussion at this point, but there are different degrees of it. So yeah, like you said, a brain bleed, a hematoma, that's really, really dangerous because it increases the pressure in your brain and kind of almost, in layman's terms, suffocates the brain. So it's not allowing it to get oxygen. It's not allowing it to do its normal processing. And ultimately that could lead to death if it's not taken care of. Those signs and symptoms of nausea, vomiting, all those deteriorating things are huge, huge indicators that you need to get checked out ASAP. And a lot of times in motor vehicle accidents and incidents where they're more severe conditions, you're going to get transported. You're going to get the care that you need. That's not necessarily saying that you can't get a brain bleed from just head-to-head impact on the football field, but obviously in those severe situations, you're probably going to have the medical care there that you do need.
Absolutely. And then how about for parents, right? We think, oh, adults are the ones who get concussions. Not necessarily. Kids could also get these as well. And they might not be playing a sport. They could just be playing outside in the playground, jumping around on a trampoline, whatever it may be. How common have you seen concussions in adolescent kids and in small kids, toddlers, maybe? Kind of talk to us about that.
Oh yeah, we work with the youth a lot, and concussions make up 13% of all youth injuries. So that right there is a pretty big deal. If you look at the whole body and all of the possible injuries that you can have, 13% is concussion. So parents definitely, I encourage them to get educated, seek out resources. Obviously, kids can't always verbalize how they're feeling. So those signs are big to see. Is your kid acting normal? Is this how are they more emotional than they usually are? Are they complaining that watching TV is giving them symptoms? So it's kind of those little things that it is a little bit harder. You have to dig a little bit more, but don't hesitate to seek out resources. The CDC has a really great website called Heads Up. I recommend it to all parents and coaches. It gives nice, it touches on like techniques of hitting and stuff for contact sports, but it also talks about signs and symptoms to look out for, what to do in those instances. So it's really nice, and it's a very good, like, in your back pocket resource that you could always have on you.
Absolutely. And that'll be linked down in the description below with the video. It's cdc.gov /heads up. So we'll make sure to have that on there for you, including some other resources as well. So now that we've kind of talked about the kids and, kind of how you mentioned in the CDC website where they tell you how to, instructing you how to hit properly, how to keep your head up when you're, making contact with another individual. Talk to us a little bit about the research that you did at Virginia Tech, because I know that's pretty groundbreaking stuff. And I know that everyone in all across professional sports, college, high school, and even the helmets that we see at Dick's Sporting Goods, right? For our kids. So, so that they're safe, right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is a very unique place. It was an absolute honor to work there and be a part of everything that they had going on there. They were an institution that was it was one of 30 institutions that was a part of this NCAA DoD Care Consortium, which is a really fancy term for a concussion research project that was funded by the NCAA as well as the DoD. And so there we did a lot of head impact biomechanics. We looked at blood biomarkers. We looked at some saliva genetics. So there's a really wide variety of what we were looking at on top of the regular cognitive assessments, baseline assessments, and all of that. So it was a huge project that's been going on since 2014. There have been over 50,000 participants. So it's really groundbreaking, the stuff that is coming out of that study. And it was an honor to work on it and be a part of it. And not only is Virginia Tech a part of that, but they also have the helmet lab there. So biomedical engineering department has the Virginia Tech helmet lab. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the 5-star rating system. And that was actually developed at Virginia Tech, which is really awesome, under Dr. Duma and Dr. Rosen. They have some really awesome people working over there. And so all these manufacturers, obviously they want to be the best of the best. They don't always have the best background in how to build the the safest helmet. Sometimes obviously athletes are going for looks, for colors, for design. They don't really care about the safety always. So it's important that this standard was set to kind of have this rating system to say, okay, as long as you're in a 3-star or better, go ahead and pick what you want, whether it's looks, weight, whatever it may be, that's up to you, but at least make sure that you're in a 3-star or better. So these manufacturers come to Virginia Tech. The biomedical engineers put the helmets through all this testing. It's a really, really, really awesome experience. But then they give them recommendations like, okay, so your helmet didn't rate so high. How about you do this and this instead? So it's almost like a consulting type deal as well. The manufacturers will go back, break it all down, rebuild it, bring it back and see what's next. I think from what I've seen at this point now, the companies that were at the head of the pack are kind of starting to fall down now, and there are new companies coming to the top. And then you get into all of this NIL stuff, or NLI, sorry. And it's just, it brings a whole new look to what we're dealing with here. So from before, your equipment staff could offer 2 types of helmets. Granted, there's different designs and whatever, but you're going to have a Rydell and you're going to have a Schutt. Take your pick of those 2. Now these companies are coming in and saying, hey, we want you to wear our helmet. So it's really important for the staff and the people working in these environments, whether it's at youth football, high school football, collegiate sports, professional sports, to really be educated on the background of this and making sure that their kids are in the safest possible gear. Obviously, like we said before, you can't prevent concussions. Concussions are going to happen, but let's set our kids up to be the safest possible in those situations.
Absolutely. And you know, you touched on the helmet safety ranking, right? I remember when I was an intern with the Miami Dolphins, every summer we would get, you know, kind of this big, huge email that almost looked like a portfolio was being handed to you from Virginia Tech. And it went across to all NFL teams and went to all collegiate teams. And it gave you that ranking, right? Said, this is the helmet with this serial number, whatever it may be, that this is the safest helmet that we could be in, right? And I literally got to see it. You know, you would walk over to the equipment room, and if those helmets weren't on the top 10 from what they had in their inventory, they literally took them off the shelf, put it aside, and ordered some more of those new helmets that made that top 10. Because again, like you said, everyone likes a different feel, everyone likes a different design. You know, maybe with your team, you're only limited to a certain amount of colors, or maybe one color, whatever it may be. But you know, the field of view is a very big component when it comes to helmets, so that the player could see, you know, what they need to see out on the field. But yeah, I found that really interesting that, you know, this organization, right, Virginia Tech's research held that much weight, that it would be sent out to all of these pro teams, and the pro teams would literally look at that, they would see it, and they would make the changes that needed to be necessary. And then obviously if a player came and told them, hey, no, I want this specific helmet, they were educated on it. It's like, hey, look, I know you want this helmet, but this isn't the safest helmet. We could get you into something extremely similar that is way safer for you. And, you know, a lot of times the player would kind of look at that. They're like, oh yeah, I kind of see it. There's just a little air hole here instead of over here. Let me just get this one. It's safer for me. And a lot of times I saw that, and guys were in safer helmets, right? And this is at the pro level. But you know, unfortunately, a lot of youth football teams, they don't have that option. They have their same helmets that they've had now for the past 10, 15 plus seasons. You look at them, they're all super scratched up. They're all beat up. You know, we're not putting our kids in the safest helmets, that's for sure. And there is a lot of technology, as you stated, that every year new companies are coming out, like you mentioned, with really, really cool technology that really disperses the impact all across the head, as opposed to the old helmets where if you got hit here, you're going to be hurting there. So it's really, really cool technology that not only Virginia Tech is testing, but that all these companies are coming out with. And I like that you mentioned that you know, the 2 big major companies that we always talk about, which is Rydell and Schutt. Not that they're going out of business, because they're not going to go out of business, but there are a lot of new names coming into the game, so to speak, that are really doing good things, and it's helping our athletes at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I know we always talk about football, and yes, it is obviously our heavy hitter, no pun intended, but also the helmet lab takes a look at baseball, catching gear, softball, even just their batting helmets. They've done a lot of stuff with equestrian, with flag football, with rugby, cycling, you name it, they're getting into it. So their rating system is really broad across the board. Obviously, there's some issues with hockey and they have their own rules and the type of athletes that they are. But we have seen an improvement in their helmets, especially at the NHL. So it's nice to see that the work that they're doing there and their efforts are really kind of starting to trickle in and have more impacts across the world of sports and not just within football. And it's also nice because their website is accessible by anyone. If you just search VT Helmet Lab, it'll come up, it'll list, they update it regularly. So the best of the best helmets, they will update them, and then they will track them all the way down. And once they aren't a 3-star anymore, you'll know it'll be off their list. So
that's really cool. And if you've never seen any of these videos of how they test these helmets, it's actually really cool. It's like crash test, dummies, with literally a crash test dummy with a helmet on it, and they're dropping it from a certain height and banging it into every single surface you can think of. I'll try to link a video in the description just so that you guys could see it. It's really, really impressive. These individuals do not cut any corners. They make sure that the product and the research that they're doing is the right research, and they look at safety first, right? They don't care about what company comes out on top. They're not funded by any specific company. They are unbiased, and that's what you want when it comes to research. And they do a really, really good job. And it was awesome that you had that experience, that you got to work with them for almost 3 years, right? A little bit longer.
Yeah, 3 years.
So that's awesome. That was a really great experience, I'm sure, that you had. And yeah, I mean, it's, again, the safety is what's key, and the safety is what's important. And it's good to know that concussion numbers, albeit that they're not coming down, so to speak, but people are safer, at least. So that's really good to know.